Well, we now commence our first segment, mobilizing around a new financial architecture, where we will hear from world leaders on how we can deliver on the UA Declaration on Climate Finance and transform climate finance. To open this segment, it's my great pleasure to now welcome to the stage His Excellency Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who has led a very successful G20 presidency this year. He has been a crucial voice on how climate action should promote development, shared prosperity, and opportunity for all, which is a fundamental principle of the UA Declaration on Climate Finance. Your Excellency, Prime Minister Modi, the stage is yours.
Your Highness,
Your Highness,
Excellency,
Excellencies,
अपनी
during
G20
our G20 presidency,
भारत ने
India
sustainable development
accorded
التنمية المستدامة
sustainable development
विषयों को
and climate change. Both of these subjects
हमने
were accorded high priority.
One Earth,
We made one Earth, one family, one future, the very basis of our presidency.
और
And
साझा प्रयासों से
through collective efforts,
कई विषयों पर
we were successful in achieving consensus on several matters.
सभी जानते हैं
Friends, we are all aware
भारत सहित
that the countries of the global south, including India,
climate
historically have had a minimal role to play in climate change. However, the adverse effects of climate change are more profound on these countries.
साधनों की कमी
Despite resource constraints,
ये देश
these countries
climate
are
action के लिए
committed
प्रतिबद्ध है।
to climate action.
ग्लोबल साउथ की आकांक्षाओं को
In
पूरा
order
करने के लिए
to fulfill their commitments,
climate finance
climate finance
और टेक्नोलॉजी
and technology,
बहुत
they are both essential for the global south.
ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों की अपेक्षा है
The countries of the global south expect
चेंज का
that developed countries provide them
देश
with
उनकी
maximum
अधिक से
support
मदद करे
to fight climate change.
ये स्वाभाविक भी है
This is not only natural, but also fair.
फ्रेंड्स
Friends,
G20 में
at the G20,
सहमति बनी
it
है
was agreed
कि क्लाइमेट
that
एक्शन
for climate action,
2030 तक
several
कई
trillion dollars of climate finance would be needed by 2030.
ऐसा क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस
There is a need
जो अवेलेबल
for a climate finance that is available, accessible,
अफोर्डेबल
and affordable.
मुझे आशा है
I hope
कि यूएई
that the
क्लाइमेट
Climate Finance Framework Initiative of the UAE
बल मिले
will strengthen efforts in this direction.
लॉस एंड डैमेज फंड को
India welcomes the historic decision taken yesterday to operationalize the Loss and Damage Fund.
से
This
COP28
has generated hopes
आसार
at this COP28 summit.
हम उम्मीद करते हैं
We hope
COP
there
समिट से
will be
क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस
concrete outcomes
अन्य
on other subjects related to climate finance and climate action also at the COP summit. Firstly,
न्यू कलेक्ट
that there will be
on climate finance
concrete and real progress at COP28 on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance.
adoption
Secondly, there will be no shortfall in the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund, and that these funds will be replenished immediately.
development banks
Thirdly, multilateral development banks will not only provide finance for development, but also affordable finance for climate action. And fourth, the
20
developed countries will end
carbon footprint.
their carbon footprint well before 2050.
UAE
I take this opportunity to welcome the announcement by UAE to set up a climate investment fund. Thank you. Thank you very much.
A huge thank you to His Excellency Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India. We now continue the discussion with a panel of heads of state to share with us how they are delivering ambitious action on this declaration. Please welcome our first guest, the Honourable Mia Amor Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados. And now please welcome His Excellency Gustavo Petro, the President of Colombia. A warm welcome, Your Excellency. Please now welcome His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, the President of France. A warm welcome. And now please do welcome His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the President of Ghana. Now please welcome His Excellency William Ruto, the President of Kenya. And now please welcome the Right Honourable Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And now to moderate the discussion, please welcome Her Excellency Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund.
Thank you very much. I have an incredible privilege to bring to you leaders who have embraced the transition to the new climate economy, one that is low carbon and climate resilient, with imagination, commitment, and very strong political will. Big round of applause for our 6 panelists. Now, I am going to start with President Macron. President Macron helped my institution, the International Monetary Fund, to come up with an offer of affordable and accessible finance for the climate transformation by waking up a dormant asset, the special drawing rights of the IMF, and turning them into over $100 billion concessional finance. I speak on behalf of those who are beneficiaries. Emmanuel, bravo. My question to you is the following. You have brought us in June in Paris for the Paris Pact for People and Planet. And what you did was, one, you exposed for everybody to see that unless we act with conviction to address inequalities in access to resources, to finance, between advanced economies and the developing world, not only what we do would be morally wrong, but it would prevent us from winning the fight against the climate crisis. You have been a strong promoter of solidarity and a spirit of unity that can get even the toughest things done, but also promoting the role of the private sector. So you're here. We are announcing this framework, which is notable for being optimistic. It is about the opportunities of the climate transition and inclusive, bring private sector, governments, and international financial institutions. Are we meeting the objective of PPPP? What more do you want to see done? President Macron.
Thank you, Kristalina. Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you very much, and all of us are very happy to be here to try to make concrete progress. And I think we need more money, and I would say smart money being channeled at the right position and going on the ground. So what we tried to do during the past few years is to mobilize much more public money on both climate change and fight against poverty. And what we tried to set up with your initiative, because more than 2 years ago it was your idea, Kristalina, and we just pushed this idea to have SDRs emission to rechannel, reallocate SDRs of rich countries towards poorest countries. And on top of that, to try to have much more mobilization of the balance sheet of both IMF and World Bank. And what we are building now with the Paris Pact for People and Planet is a very simple approach. Number one, nobody has to choose between fight against poverty and climate change. Because it was a protest of a lot of countries in Africa, in Pacific, in Latam, saying, okay, you are lecturing us on climate change, but you are not given money in order to fix poverty and inequalities in our countries. Fair point. Number two, the way to fix these issues should be a national one. It should be decided by people in charge, and each country has decided its own way. This is a matter of objective, but it's not a unique model, a one-size-fits-all to be decided in Washington, D.C. or Brussels or Paris. Doesn't work. It's a national approach. Exactly what we launched in Glasgow with the JETP, what we are launching with the country forest package for biodiversity, a country-by-country approach. Third point, we have to mobilize much more money. And what we decided, and we launched in Paris, followed up in Nairobi, New York, and here is we are multiplying by 3 the mobilization of money between IMF, World Bank, and finance in common. And I want to thank as well all the multilateral banks and development banks being present. And fourth, we need much more private money. So I think we improved because, for instance, on SDRs, we are at 110, something like that, and even more thanks to the commitment of EAU today. We have the Loss and Damage Fund, which is part of this initiative, and I want to thank Mia because it was an idea launched in Bridgetown Initiative. And we will commit up to 100 million on this issue and this fund to be clear. But I think we need much more. And we need a series of clarification. And I just want to complete this agenda and the 4 Ps approach by 3 elements being part of it. One, on loss and damage. We will have to prepare to simplify the governance, and this is why I say up to, given the governance, because we should distinguish intermediary revenue countries and poor countries. We will have to give a very open mandate for the governance because it should not be over-monitored, and we discussed that with Ajay. And we should be very careful on 2 things on loss and damage. Number one, it should not be a substitute of insurance and reinsurance business. Because for a lot of countries, this is their job. And we have to rethink and, I would say, reframe the financials. But it should not be taxpayers' money of certain countries to pay instead of what the insurers will leave. Otherwise, we would create a big disorder in this world. And the second point is in terms of contribution. All those who contribute to the situation should be part of it. And we should not forget prevention. And this is why, thanks to the SDRs, what the IMF is financing in a lot of countries are prevention actions.
Yes.
And it's very important because it's much more profitable than just financing loss and damage, because it's too late. I think we have to focus in the months to come on 2 additional things. One is how to have a better carbon market. We have a lot of private money. We have to be sure that this private money is fairly and rightly channeled toward the right actions. And this is the work we launched with Rishi in order to reform carbon market and to work together on biodiversity credits. But we need now a market in order to take into consideration the right carbon and biodiversity impact in order to channel private finance to the smart actions. And my last point is, clearly, we have private money, we have public money on our commitments, but we need international tax. I want to thank my good friend William Ruto, because we conceived that in Paris and in Nairobi during the summit, launched this initiative. And during this COP, we launch very clearly, and we start this task force for international taxation. And the idea is to have now this working group, because this international taxation should finance fight against poverty and climate change actions. And this task force should report next year. Next week would be super, I would love. Next year, and in order to find a compromise, but to make it in action for COP30 in Brazil. This is, for me, very good compliments to what we launched and what we are delivering. All in all, what we are doing in concrete terms is a complete reshuffle of our global governance. And I just want to conclude on that. The point is, our current architecture is no more adapted to our challenges. We need much more money. We need a better articulation between public and private. But we do need much more inclusiveness. A lot of countries today didn't exist where these institutions were created. They have no voice in our institutions. And this is why part of these actions and these concrete actions is as well now the reshuffling in the years to come of our common financial global architecture in order to make it much more fair and much more inclusive. I will not be longer.
Great, very well said. And I can see there was a lot of nodding when he talked about the work to be done in the future. You mentioned President William Ruto, the Nairobi Declaration, the Africa Climate Summit. It was remarkable, bringing the continent to seek into the future a transformation of how energy is being supplied, how agriculture is being managed, how forest becomes an asset standing, not being chopped down. So, President Ruto, You talk about green industrialization for Africa being once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What do you expect from finance, from the discussion we have today, so this opportunity is realized? What is your vision? What is your ambition?
Thank you very much, Kristalina. And I associate myself with everything President Macron has said, especially in the space of where are we going to find additional new revenue sources for climate financing. The Africa Climate Summit brought African leaders together. And for a very long time, Africa has been in the corner of problems. We're trying to move Africa from being in the corner of problems to the corner of solutions. And we stated very clearly that we have ideas, we have suggestions, we believe Africa has the greatest stake in contributing to the solution around climate change. And we got ourselves here, this problem of climate change, because of energy, fossil fuel energy. We will get out of here again because of energy, renewable energy. And that renewable energy is in abundance in Africa. And that is why we believe that we are very well positioned to be part of the solution to the challenge we have today, so that, as Macron says, no country is left between making a choice between development or climate action. So we made a conscious proposition in the Africa Climate Summit. Number one, we said we are positioning Africa with our assets, that Africa has huge potential. We have 60% of the world's renewable energy. We have 40% of the world's minerals that can be used for transition. We have the largest, maybe 2/3 of the world's uncultivated arable land. We have the world's youngest population. So we have real assets that we can bring to the table to solve the problem of climate change and to solve the problem of development. And that is why we said three things are therefore very important. With our assets, we believe that the solution going forward is how do we tap into the huge green energy opportunity, potential and opportunity in our continent. We're lacking technology and we are lacking capital. And therefore, three things come into the equation. Number one, how do we unlock the resources that have been committed? Whether it is in loss and damage, and I'm very happy that we've made progress in the last few days, thanks to UAE and other partners. How do we then look at the international financial architecture? How do we empower World Bank? How do we empower the IMF to do more concessional funding? How do we reorganize their governance so that those countries that did not exist, many of them in Africa, when the IMF and the World Bank were brought into being, how do we get them to have a say? How do we speak to recapitalizing these multilateral development banks? How do we improve on liquidity, the subject SDRs that President Macron was talking about? How do we deal with the real issue of exaggerated risk that is destroying African governments? You know, how do we de-risk African investments? And how do we bring on board finances from the private sector? And therefore, ultimately, we came down to green industrialization is a big opportunity. Big opportunity, why? Because we have the green energy. We have the green raw materials, whether it is bauxite, whether it is steel, whether it is iron ore. We can export very many green products out of Africa, whether we are talking about bauxite, aluminium, steel, green products to Europe in terms of food products. So Africa has the potential. We have the opportunity. We have everything that we need to power our green industrialization. And that is the reason why we are very clear about what is lacking. That is climate finance. And that is why we are willing to go all the way to the launch we are going to make in this COP of a new framework, what we called in Nairobi a new global financing charter. We're going to have a global financing framework according to UAE, and we are going to have here another framework aligned, synergized, so that by next COP, we will have a new financial pact that brings on board resources. How do we collect additional resources? Is it tax? Is it carbon pricing? How do we leverage on carbon markets? How do we bring into the equation all the issues around natural carbon sinks, whether they are our forests, whether they are our peatlands, whether the majority of these are in the part of the continent we come from. So we believe that Africa can make a huge contribution with our assets if we were to agree on how financing can be obtained, and we are ready and willing to play our part, including making a contribution in the new financing framework.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Look, you listed all the assets of Africa. It is very clear there cannot be a prosperous world without a prosperous Africa. One asset I would add is leadership. It is fantastic to have leaders on the continent that have that vision that you just presented to us. We made a small correction at the IMF by adding a third chair to represent Sub-Saharan Africa. Problems are not solved, but we made a small installment.
For which we are grateful.
I want to turn to Rishi Sunak. The UK took the lead on placing climate finance at the center of discussions in COP in Glasgow. And the UK has been fantastic in promoting innovations to make the financial capacity of multilateral development banks, of the IMF, go further than otherwise through guarantees and other forms of innovation. So what next? Where do you see the UK making further contributions in the financial arena? Prime Minister Sunak.
Thanks, Kristalina, and it's been good to work with you on this topic for some years now. I guess let me start by saying that I recognize the frustrations about the limits of development and climate finance, right? If you look at it, developing countries pay 5 times more to borrow on private capital markets. Investment in renewables is growing at an extraordinary pace, but right now, I think less than 2% of that is going into Africa. And, you know, President Ruto has argued previously, others have, that that situation is completely indefensible. And I agree. I think we would all agree with that. And that's why the $30 billion Global Climate Fund that's been announced is so welcome. It's why the Global Climate Framework is so important. And I'm pleased that the UK is supporting that. But if we want, Kristalina, as you said, this bigger, better financial system that's going to help us get the SDGs back on track, deliver all the Paris agreements, and actually reverse biodiversity loss, then I think there are probably 3 areas where we need to focus, and it overlaps a lot with Emmanuel said earlier. I think the first is we just need fresh thinking about how we do this, and that's why a while ago we pioneered the use of climate resilient debt clauses, so that climate disasters don't become economic disasters, and those should be standard across the board by 2025. They will make an enormous difference. We need reform of the financial institutions. You and I have spoken about that in the past, and we support a conditional capital increase for the World Bank, and Ajay is sitting there because where we can stretch these balance sheets to make a difference, we should, and I know that we will, which will be welcome to many people. So that's the first thing, is fresh thinking in how we do things. I think the second thing is just we need to dig deep and find the resources. So, you know, we're here today as the UK announcing over £1.5 billion of new initiatives, not only to the Loss and Damage Fund, which it's crucial that we've got that off the ground, but also for forest sustainability, which Emmanuel and you touched on with President Ruto, which is an incredibly important part, and we will deliver on our commitments. We feel a responsibility to deliver on the £11.5 billion of climate finance that we promised, and we will do that. And then I think the third area is to recognise that this can't be done with public money alone. And that's why leveraging private sector capital is so critical. London is an enormous global financial centre. I took a decision 3 years ago to make it a net zero aligned financial centre, and that is having an enormous catalytic impact. And in particular, things like carbon markets, which Ajay will talk about later, I think, are crucial for harnessing that private capital into those countries who need it, but also being creative about insurance products. Again, it's a big strength of London, and where we can have creative, inventive insurance products that work, that will leverage capital that we need at scale. So look, I think COP President said at the beginning, we need a step change in our approach to this, but if we do things in those three buckets, which again overlap with what others have said, I'm highly confident we can deliver that change.
So very much agree with you. Thank you. That is, look, this is why these leaders are here, because they have done it and they're going to do more. And I'm going to turn now to the President of Ghana, President Akufo-Addo, who has taken the responsibility for the V20, the vulnerable countries. There are unfortunately many more than 20, and has moved the attention to these countries up and forward. One of the legacies from your time is going to be much more attention to what countries define as their priorities. So as you're going to pass the baton to Mia Motley right here, what are the messages you want to bring? And out of the experience of Ghana, what do you want this new framework for climate finance to deliver for you?
So thank you very much indeed, Kristalina. I don't know whether you're responsible for the panel, but I'm grateful to be a part of it. Thank you very much for it. And also, of course, to our hosts for bringing us all here together and the work that they're doing. I think there are two or three things that, for me, are critical. First of all, the sums of monies that are required by the vulnerable. There are 56 countries involved in the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which at the moment Ghana chairs, but which is going to be chaired very soon by Prime Minister Mia Motley. We now have an independent secretariat, which is hosted in Accra, and the former president of the Maldives, Mohamed Nasheed, is the one who's going to be the new Secretary General. So we're going to have a formidable leadership, Mia Motley and him, to carry on the work of the thing. I think the first thing is recognize the scale of the problem. We're talking, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about it when he spoke, and we're talking about trillions of monies that are required for the transition to be effective in the vulnerable nations of the world. It is now clear to all of us that that money cannot come from taxpayers' monies in the West. It can't come from public monies. It has to come from the private sector, where the trillions of monies available in the globe are. And I think that that points to one immediate solution for us. To what extent institutions like your own, the IMF, and the World Bank can become bridges for countries like my own and the vulnerable countries to be able to access these funds. Historically, the monies that we have access to have been the most expensive monies in the world. We are the poorest people on the globe, and when we borrow money, we pay more for it than those who have money. That is a situation that has, and it can only be reversed if the World Bank and the IMF become this catalyst for being able to access the large monies that are out there. And I think that for us, from what we have seen in Ghana, is something extremely important. That is one of the important decisions that have been taken by the Climate Environment Fund, which Mia Motley and are going to carry on. The second, of course, is the issue of the voice. Yes. The decision that has been made by the IMF to have this third, as it were, voice for us is a very welcome one. But we want to see that trend carried across all the global institutions, that there is now an effective representation of those who have not been represented before, especially the Africans. Because if decisions are going to be made of the magnitude that now has to be done, those who are affected have to be there to be able to make sure that the decisions are the right ones that are going to be made. So that's the second and absolutely key aspect. And thirdly, the mindset. We've lived so far on the assumption that some people have to be poor for others to be rich. That mindset is what is at stake in the whole climate discussion. Because for it to succeed, for us to be able to make the transition that will enable all of us to live in this planet in an equitable and successful manner, we all have to see ourselves as part of one family. That has not been the picture up till now. Are people now prepared to recognize that we can create a world where there'll be prosperity, will be even and broadly based? If that is possible, then the mindset that will allow us to make those decisions will also have to change. I think that these are the three, for me, the three institutional matters that we have to look at.
So the message is a better world is possible.
It's possible.
That is the world we must come to. And I cannot think of someone who has been most energetically involved in fighting for a better world than Mia Motley. We all know about the Bridge Down Initiative, Mia. We know that you don't shy away from speaking truth to power. We also know that you are tremendously capable of bringing solution mindset rather than a, oh my goodness, it's so bad, crying mindset. So tell us how you see this COP. How do you see our moving to a better world?
Thank you very much, Kristalina, and let me thank our hosts here in UAE for their passion and for the excellent arrangements thus far. This is where the rubber hits the road, and regrettably, we've been talking for some time. We're beginning to see progress. The question is whether it will be equal to what is needed. We believe, for example, that the capitalization of the Loss and Damage Fund is critical because it provides essential grant funds post-disaster, and that is absolutely necessary. But the scale of its capitalization will be a concern to all if it is not properly capitalized. And that's why we feel that a mechanism that allows both for capitalizing the loss and damage, but increasing what is available to you with the Resilience Sustainability Trust and what is available to development banks for resilience funding is equally critical. We've been talking about public money, which has to continue. We've been talking, however, also about mechanisms for non-state actors contributing. And whether it is through the international taxation that Emmanuel is speaking about, where we can spread the burden, not just to the oil and gas companies, which we've said, if you've made $4 trillion in profits last year, $200 billion will not hurt you. Treat 95% of your profits as 100% and give the other 5% to be shared between a loss and damage fund and finance and resilience and adaptation through the mechanisms. Similarly, we're asking people, and I'm conscious of the time, so please, we're asking people to look at how do we share the burden. Each of us wants to save the planet. Now, if we have 4 billion people traveling last year, who is going to stop traveling because of a $5 or $10 charge per ticket? And that allows everybody to be able to share the burden, as William and Emmanuel are looking to do with the International Taxation Force. Similarly, you have $7 trillion in goods moving on ships last year. If you put 1% on that, that's another 70 billion. So when you take 200 from oil and gas and you take 70 billion from international shipping, not to be passed on to the consumer, by the way, and when you take equally another 40, 50 billion from international travelers, air travelers, and then you look at what is the most efficient financial transactions tax and dealing with insurance, so that we have a dedicated source of funding, not just for loss and damage, but for the global public goods that have to be financed in order to build resilience. Secondly, we need to be able to determine how best we're going to manage and regulate carbon markets. We're talking all over the place, and we haven't settled on how best this can work to avoid the greenwashing and to avoid implosion. Thirdly,
Ajay is going to solve this.
I hope so.
Putting him
And he's already started with what the climate resilient debt clauses, debt pause clauses, what we call climate clauses. Barbados is the largest issuer globally now of debt with climate clauses. It works. Immediately upon a disaster, we will be allowed to save over 2 years 20% of GDP. That makes sense because I don't need to be paying debt when I should be providing shelter or providing food immediately after a disaster. And we learned the hard way when Dominica had to pay money immediately upon that. And the last point I want to make is where and how are we going to make decisions? Because that is what is holding us back. We get here, we talk. At the end of the day, how are we going to have a mechanism that can secure international taxation as efficiently as the world has imposed on us, the global taxes and Pillar 2 with respect to the global minimum tax? How are we going to ensure that the voices of small countries who have a different reality, insurance works where insurable risk exists? And Emmanuel, I hope we can get that for other parts of the world. But my fear is in the Caribbean, it's already being seen as an uninsurable risk. We see the retreat of insurance companies in Florida. We see the absolute retreat of them in California with wildfires. So that is why we went for debt clauses, because it gives us access to money to deal with people who are uninsured and underinsured immediately after disaster. So I hope we can continue the conversation. Obviously, 3 minutes or 4 minutes can't get into the details of it, but suffice it to say that we have enough ideas. The problem is, where is the decision-making going to be made, and who is going to be at the table to make the decisions? Because it isn't only about state actors, it's also about non-state actors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liam. I should have done it when Rishi spoke. The UK truly shook up the world on how we deal with the countries or projects, for that matter, hit by a natural disaster. So I very much recognize your contribution. Last but not least on our panel is somebody who has been on the front line talking about Marshall Plan for climate, President Petro. You also hosted in Cartagena the first in Latin America grounded World Summit of national development banks. How do you see COP on finance with this declaration moving us in the direction of that ambition you talked about? And I'm really sorry to ask you to be short because the organizers are telling us that I am a miserable moderator. So please, President Petro.
Breve no voy a poder ser, pero indudablemente se ha puesto en discusión. Ha comenzado desde hace 2, 3 años el tema de cambiar la estructura de financiamiento del mundo para poder abocar salidas reales, efectivas a la crisis climática. Cartagena es apenas una parte de esa discusión entre un proceso que tiene que profundizarse y llegar a acciones concretas. Uno, acciones concretas que no pueden ser marginales, no pueden ser miles de millones de dólares. En español tienen que ser billones de dólares para afrontar el problema. Es una enorme cantidad financiera para poder transitar de una economía carbonizada hacia una descarbonizada. Estamos afrontando un problema extraordinario para la humanidad, nunca lo habíamos vivido. Por tanto, las soluciones, las salidas son también extraordinarias. 2, me distancio un poquito del presidente de Ghana. La transición de la economía descarbonizada de la economía carbonizada hacia la descarbonizada no es rentable. La mayor parte del esfuerzo no se mide en rentabilidad. Por ejemplo, salvar la selva amazónica no es rentable. Lo rentable ha sido destruirla. Lo mismo podríamos ver en las selvas del Congo, en las selvas de Indonesia. La mayor parte del esfuerzo para...
Most of the effort that we have made to solve this crisis is not based on rentability. That's why the capital is not going to get to that kind of effort. It's going to go for the affordable efforts. But most of this effort has to be focused on the public sector, public money. And where is this money located? Nowadays, every country, every state has a big debt, both rich and poor. We are all indebted through the IMF, through the World Bank. And this is where we need to see a shift. What do we propose? Something that was already done during COVID, so that we can allow special SDR so that we can improve each state. Some of them would have more, some of them would have less, but then altogether we would have more capability to finance in renewable clean energies, energetic transitions that can allow us to solve this problem. This is in the hands of the IMF and those in charge of the World Bank and these institutions. If we take this at scale, if we give each state more power, we will have to open 2 discussions. One, a world planification for this transition amongst states. And in second place, we should open a door to the contract among states so that these monies, especially the public ones, can flow towards where the real possibilities lie in terms of renewable energies. I share this opinion with the President of Kenya. It's in Africa and South America where we see the big potential for renewable clean energy. We cannot go into a loop for fossil fuels and oils. We have to create a universal scale of zero carbon. Thank you.
Thank you. having admitted my failure to keep everybody within a short period of time, the only way I can recoup any remaining reputation is to say, thank you very much. I will not sum up. You were fantastic. Thank you. But it was very interesting.
A unique insight from 7 heads of state on how they will work together to deliver on the UA Declaration on Climate Finance, turning ambition into action. And what a great privilege it is to have you all here today and to hear such an encouraging discussion. Thank you so much. You may now take your seats. Thank you so much.